Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill does something that Representative Muschinski and Representative Green worked on back in 1995 and had some success in 2000, 2001, where the state of Connecticut finally adopted new guidelines in terms of allowing a child to withdraw from school. Prior to their efforts, a child could just withdraw without a parent's consent at 16 years old. And through their efforts, since about 2001, the state of Connecticut has required a parent to consent, and that exists for both 16 and 17 years old. Mr. Speaker, I think it's time that we catch up with the times and we push it out a year. And what this bill serves to do is to raise that to 17 years old with parents' consent, and to avoid the fiscal notes and to take note of our economic times. This would not take effect until 2011, so that there would be no fiscal note in the biennium budget. The reason why this is so important, my colleagues, is because there is a real correlation between obtaining a high school diploma and negative factors in our society. 45% of the folks that are on welfare in the state of Connecticut that receive TANF in the state of Connecticut do not have a high school diploma. I reached out to the Family Services Council, which does welfare to work in our state, trying to help people overcome obstacles and get a job and get off welfare, which is, I think, something that we would all want to see happen. And they said to me that the number one obstacle in terms of moving a person from welfare to work is the lack of a high school diploma. So, Mr. Speaker, I talked to a number of the students, and they have 30 offices throughout the state of Connecticut with 40 adults in each class that they have. Many of those students, actually adults now, regret the fact that they did not stay in high school and get their high school diploma. And now they are working towards trying to get a GED so that they can go out into the workforce and obtain a job. Folks, when we talk about cost-benefit analysis, TANF for this year, for next year, is $117 million to the state budget. Think about that. And 50% of the folks that are going to receive those dollars do not have a high school diploma. The other piece to this is our incarceration rates. Nationally, 67% of the people who are incarcerated in this country do not have a high school diploma. And we ran the numbers 2 weeks ago in the state of Connecticut, and the Department of Corrections came back and they said 41% as of today do not have a high school diploma or a GED that are in our prison systems today. And we all know that the cost for our DOC to incarcerate people in the state of Connecticut is $100 million plus. So the cost-benefit analysis, Mr. Speaker, of moving this forward is quite significant. The other piece of moving this forward is to do something for the achievement gap in the state of Connecticut. Mr. Speaker, I think it's long overdue that we as a state begin to pay attention to the fact that we have the largest achievement gap in this country. What's the correlation? Well, the highest dropout rates across the state of Connecticut are amongst African Americans and Latinos. And I say it's about time that we do something to reform our high schools, with this being the first step, to reduce the number of African Americans and Latinos that are dropping out of school. Mr. Speaker, it's a sad day that our state of Connecticut has not applied for the competitive stimulus grants that are being offered from the Department of Education on a federal level. And I suspect that the reason why we did not apply as a state for those competitive grants is because we have not done enough in this area in terms of the achievement gap. Because it is competitive, and we would have to demonstrate that we were actually putting things in place to address this achievement gap. Another reason, Mr. Speaker, is pure economics. What is the cost of doing nothing? 9,800 students did not graduate from Connecticut's high schools in 2008. That is a lifetime loss of earnings of $2.5 billion. Connecticut would save $155 million in health care costs over the lifetimes of each class of these dropouts had they earned their diplomas. If Connecticut's high schools graduated all of their students ready for college, the state would save almost $29 million a year in community college remediation costs. And I have talked to so many administrators that are dealing at the community college level, and that is their number one complaint, that they have to re-educate and begin from scratch to help kids read and do math in our community colleges. And finally, Connecticut's economy would see a combined crime-related savings and additional revenue of about $63 million each year if the male high school graduation rate increased by just 5%. The second component of this bill, which is just as important as the first, is the adult education component of the bill. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a dirty secret in education. And that dirty secret is that if a student withdraws from school and goes into adult education, they are not calculated into the graduation rate, and they are not calculated into the dropout rate. So they're invisible. So an administrator could easily change their dropout rate by encouraging students to go into adult education. What this bill serves to do, Mr. Speaker, is to begin to track that and quantify those numbers so that if a school has a disproportionate number of children in adult education, the Department of Education can do something about it. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, you know, if we do a mortgage, we do a refi on a mortgage, we get 3 days to think about it and change our minds, and we don't have to go forward with that decision. But in the state of Connecticut today, if a child withdraws from school and he hands in that note, he's out of school for 90 days. Automatically, he is not allowed to come back. That is easily 1 semester's worth of work. So what this bill does is allow for a 10 calendar day grace period once that withdrawal form is submitted, so that perhaps maybe that child will go home and speak to a grandma or a grandpa or an aunt or a pastor or his employer or someone that will give him some other things to think about. And Mr. Speaker, I think that 10 days is a decent amount of time. Those withdrawal forms, my friends, across the state of Connecticut are not uniform. I did an FOI to 10 of the highest dropout rated schools across the state, and I got a different withdrawal form from each one. many of which did not even ask a guidance counselor or an administrator from the school to sign the form so that our current statutes would be enforced. Because our current statutes require or say that the school has to perform an exit interview or talk to these children. So we included a component to clean up our existing statutes so that these withdrawal forms do not become permission slips for field trips or something else. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that when we vote on this, we vote on this amendment by roll.
Question before the chamber is a roll call vote. All those in favor of roll call vote, please signify by saying aye.